I'm Brian Foster, and this is the Grindhouse Institute. On each episode of this podcast, Jeremy Floyd and I program a triple feature movie night. Each of the movies share common themes, and we discuss them here. We're happy you could join us for part one of a two-part block we call Scorsese Gangsters. Martin Charles Scorsese was born November 17, 1942 in Queens, New York. A genuine cinephile, Scorsese grew up with the movies, entranced by the magic of the silver screen. Scorsese would go on to inspire generations of cinephile fanboys, like your hosts, by making some of the most influential, controversial, artistically daring yet accessible films of all time. For the series, we're focusing on one particular aspect of Scorsese's 50-year career in movies, one for which he's best known, the gangster picture. Charlie, a small-time hood and the nephew of the local mafioso, has a lot on his mind. His best friend, the perennial fuck-up Johnny boy, his secret girlfriend Teresa, his wise guy uncle, and his very soul. Harvey Keitel and Robert De Niro star in Mean Streets from 1972. After making box office and critical success, Rocky producer Irwin Winkler teamed up with De Niro and Scorsese to make this through-the-looking-glass, almost spiritual sequel about a boxer who was decidedly less heroic. To create this anti-Rocky, Scorsese assembled his team of usual suspects like Paul Schrader, Marty Martin, Joe Pesci, Frank Vincent, Robert De Niro, and Thelma Schoonmaker. This is 1980's Raging Bull. As far back as he could remember, Henry Hill always wanted to be a gangster. This classic tale of a gangster's rise and fall was made with such passion and intensity, providing both a realistic and expressionistic look at gangsters, that it redefined the genre. Ray Liotta and De Niro star alongside Joe Pesci, who won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor in 1990's GoodFellas. Thank you for listening to the Grindhouse Institute. Please enjoy.
You don't make up for your sins in the church. You do it in the streets. You do it at home. The rest is bullshit, and you know it.
We didn't even talk about how Harvey Keitel seemed to be this good luck charm for first-time directors. Scorsese, Tarantino, and Ridley Scott. He was the star in all three of their debuts.
What was Ridley Scott's debut?
The Duelists.
Oh.
Before Alien, right before Alien.
Wow.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's crazy.
You know Joey Clams?
Yeah.
Joey Scala, yeah.
I know him too, yeah.
Yeah, Joey Scala's Joey Clams.
Right.
Right.
They're the same person.
Yeah.
Hey.
Hey.
All right, welcome back to the Grindhouse Institute. I'm Brian Foster, and with me, as always, is Jeremy Floyd. Hello, and how are you?
You can't call me a mook.
Yeah.
Mook? What's
right.
a mook?
We went right to mook. I had to look up mook during the watching Mean Streets today, not today.
So, yeah. Well, I watched Mean Streets with Alyssa, and right when that scene came up, she was the guy was like, "You're a mook," and she was like, "What's a mook?"
You can look it up.
I was like, "Well, you're quoting the movie. Hang on a second. We'll get to it."
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, yes. A very exciting block. A block that I'm not sure why it took us so long to get to, because this was a heavy hitter, and I don't even mean that as a pun. We watched three amazing Scorsese films. Specifically, that you calling this the Scorsese's Gangsters picture.
Yeah,
I would say New York Gangsters, though, to be specific.
Yeah. Although, the idea behind this one is, we're doing a two-parter here because he's got so many of them.
Yeah.
But, of course, Scorsese and the gangster film are sort of, one-on-one synonymous. It's, a theme that kind of runs through a lot of his movies. And, of course, there's this particular connection to the, New York Italian-American mafioso type gangster. Mm-hmm. But, he also does other types of gangsters, like The Departed, it's got the sort of
the
Irish mob in Boston, and Gangs of New York, of course, in the 1800s.
Yeah.
But, there's this particular, flavor that he comes back to so often. And it's sort of in these really interesting markers throughout his career, and especially with The Irishman, it kind of brings all of that together. It seems a little like a career retrospective, although I really like the movie, it also has that quality. It's not as if that's the only thing you can enjoy about it. But the idea was we're gonna do Mean Streets, Raging Bull, Goodfellas, and then next time we'll do Casino and Irishman. Hour wise, I think even though it's only two movies, we're gonna be watching.
That might be more content than the entire Dune miniseries. Yeah, so exactly. We're talking about Mean Streets today, 1973, Raging Bull from 1980, and Goodfellas from 1990. Mean Streets and Raging Bull, first time I've ever seen these movies.
Really?
So,
okay.
Yeah, and I've seen Goodfellas more times, again, than I'd like to admit. But like you said, there is a specific flavor that's happening between these three movies specifically. Yeah. They almost feel like a set of a trilogy or like the same. It is the same world, so I guess that would make sense.
Like it's part of his canon. It's like Stephen King has the Dark Tower series, or that there's like the Game of Thrones world or whatever. Like this is like his like world building type of thing. Mm-hmm. And the way he explores these things, especially these three, let's say, you'd think, okay, Mean Streets, Goodfellas, Casino. Okay, that makes sense, right? It's all, certain levels of mafioso, and then like what the hell's Raging Bull doing in there, and I think we'll get to that in a little bit, but I think all of these show this evolution, not only his sort of filmmaking, Scorsese's filmmaking, but this particular type of movie gangster that he more or less made his own genre, essentially. It's like, obviously the gangster films, been around since the 30s or possibly even earlier. And certainly even before Mean Streets, we had The Godfather, right? Which is a different type of like mafia movie. But the way that Scorsese treats it is, he on the one hand makes it extremely realistic, and then on the other hand, makes it extremely stylish and expressionistic. And even in the earliest iteration in Mean Streets, with the camera mounted to Harvey Keitel's chest, he's like
the Snorri
drinking.
Cam.
Yeah.
Is that the first time the Snorri Cam was used? When I saw that, I was like, holy shit.
Right. I had first seen it in Pi, and then Darren Aronofsky used it again in Requiem for a Dream to great effect.
Very effective.
But I was like, completely
same effect here, though, right? As effective here.
To see it in Mean Streets, and like, oh my god, and it had that same effect of when you're partying a little too hard, and that the whole world is just
a little bit of unease, confusion, and where the hell am I? Yeah. And like I said, this was the first time seeing that, and I just want to go right into saying how amazing Harvey Keitel is in this movie. Especially after seeing him in Reservoir Dogs, also amazing in that movie. But this one, I mean, really, I know that this is a De Niro film. He's actually top billed in this movie, but I really think the Keitel is steals the show.
Harvey Keitel in this, like as Charlie, is the sort of Henry Hill character in this movie. He's sort of the focal point, and it's ostensibly about those four characters that we are sort of introduced to in the beginning. That we have their little title cards that come up, but it's really kind of about Charlie and then like the other guys in his orbit.
Right? Yeah, his crew.
Same way that like Goodfellas is sort of about Henry, but then you get Jimmy the Gent and
you get Paulie and
Paulie and Pooty. And all these guys like
Jimmy 2 times. I gotta go get the papers.
What's up, guy? Frankie Eyes.
Let's stick with Mean Streets before we take the entire show for Goodfellas.
For Goodfella quotes, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I love this, and I think you hit it on the head as the amount of realism in this movie. I wasn't there, I don't know, but I can assume that this is pretty close to what it was like in New York at that time. Late 70s. I'm sorry, this is early 70s, 73, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so early 70s at that time. I know that there was a lot of drug use around that time, and it was pretty heavily prevalent with gangster activity. And I think he nailed all of that. Right off the bat, we see, the guy doing heroin in the bar. He really gets into the nitty gritty of the grittiness of the city. And then, like you said, we're introduced to these characters in a very, and again, like coming from watching movies in the 90s and stuff, this felt like stuff that was done much later, but he was doing it there with those title cards and like that stop and like those frame holds.
You could see a lot of the sort of Pulp Fiction, like the Vincent Vega story or whatever, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Like the rock and roll soundtrack, that whole thing too.
Yeah. A lot of Guy Ritchie stuff, I feel like he did a lot of that too. Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, again, this was way ahead of its time. And since it's the beginning of the movie, I mean, I just wanted to bring it up. You can really see in these three, specifically Goodfellas and Mean Streets, Scorsese's use of licensed music and his love of real music. When Mean Streets starts with "Be My Little Baby," like pounding, like it's really in your face with that home movie footage,
the home video footage, which. Like that part of it too, like also kind of made this the perfect like stopping point for part one, because all three of these movies had these sections, like these montage sections of home video footage, or in this case, home 8mm home movies,
Super 8 or
like Mean Streets opens with it basically. Raging Bull has that section right in the middle where it's in color, and then even in Goodfellas. Well, like it's a photo montage.
Oh, that was awesome.
Of like their Christmases or whatever it is, but like they kind of have that same feel.
Change the aspect ratio, really take you out of the normal look of the film, and really like hone you in that this is a flashback or some story that you're getting.
But it has this like documentary feel to it, which is like all three of these movies also have that sort of feel a little bit as well, where it's like there's like a certain amount of grittiness to everything. And you were saying a minute ago, like how you weren't there, you don't know what it was like there in New York, but by being in these movies, because they feel so authentic and they feel so textured and real, and like the way that people interact with one another and the way that they have sometimes surprising reactions, but even when they're surprising, they still feel sort of grounded and real. It feels like it puts you in that time and space, and it's almost that sort of documentary observation. As opposed to artifice,
Exactly, and I don't think it's just a matter of saving money because you're hand holding the camera at this point. This is a very intentional thing, which is interesting because I feel that I agree with you on all that, and I don't mean to move on to Raging Bull so quick, but I do want to say that a lot of that movie does feel documentary, except for the boxing. Mm-hmm. The boxing feels like this. Well, remember we talked about black box theater in during
it was totally
The Usual Suspects.
A lot of that stuff,
It was very dreamy. They added, like the stylish touches, like you were talking about, the squirts of blood. It was almost anime style, right? Like that big squirt of blood, and I mean he does that consistently in all these movies as well. There's those scenes of heavy squirting of blood.
Yeah. It's 11:30. We're supposed to be here. We're supposed to be there by 9.
Shit, I'll be ready.
Yeah, you're always fucking late. You're late for your own fucking funeral.
Oh, man. The lines are going to be, when we cut these, obviously we put in a lot of lines from movies. I wouldn't be surprised if we need a whole separate cut to fill in all the Goodfellas and the lines from these movies.
You're saying this episode's going to be 4.5 hours? So just like
as long as The Irishman.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go back to Harvey Keitel and Robert De Niro, Charlie and Johnny Boy. This relationship to me felt a lot like Of Mice and Men. That story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's looking out for Johnny Boy when no one else would. No one else believes in him. And
Johnny, Lenny, I kind of had this, and Johnny was not helping himself in by any way.
And Johnny Boy seems a little a little special, sometimes, where it's like he's not he's not thinking clearly a lot of times.
The first time we meet him, he blows up a trash can.
Yeah, no, it was a mailbox, right?
A mailbox, yeah. He drops a bomb inside of a mailbox and blows it up, and he just runs away. And it's like, Johnny Boy. I mean, talk about an intro to a character. And I mean, this is, again, Scorsese just completely owning cinema at this point, This is 1973, which blows my mind.
Right.
And I love that Scorsese made an appearance, a big appearance in Mean Streets. He was a bit of voiceover when he was doing some of the expository stuff, but then he was also the fellow that shoots Johnny Boy in the neck.
Right, exactly.
Had no idea.
He's the gunman at the end, right?
From the back seat. He didn't even take shotgun. He took the back seat so they could pull up next to him and pop him in the neck.
No, but it's like, this one, it's interesting because it's like, okay, kind of like John Carpenter, Martin Scorsese did a student film, and, he hired this, theater student he met, Harvey Keitel, to be in it. And it was like one of those things where like it was the movie got to a certain length, and like some distributor said, hey, if you put a sex scene in it, we'll distribute it for you. Kind of like how in Dan O'Bannon and John Carpenter's Dark Star, they had sort of like a really long student film. It was like, like a 50-minute student film or something. And they're like, hey, if you pad it out with a couple more scenes, we'll release this thing. So that became Who's Knocking at My Door. It had a ton of different titles. But, when you watch it, it's in black and white. It's very sort of experimental. And it's definitely interesting, for like an excavation type of thing. Like
sure.
if you're kind of studying this. But
the deep dive, yeah.
Then off of that, he gets hired by Roger Corman to do Boxcar Bertha.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was like, I don't know, his first job or whatever. It was, a sort of a bigger budget than the $0 budget that he was working off of with Who's Knocking at My Door. And that's where, I think David Carradine's in that, right? He's the sort of second
and
lead.
His son, yeah. His son's the assassin.
Oh, really?
to kill David Carradine, yeah. He kills his own dad. Yeah, Louis Skolnick, yeah.
Right. And then, then David Carradine comes into this one as a kind of a small cameo in Mean Streets a little bit. He's like one of the drunken guy who gets assassinated or whatever. When that guy's trying to make
doesn't know how to take a leak. Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely forgets how to take a piss.
Yeah. I didn't read the instructions on this one. But, despite the fact that he did 2 movies before this is, often kind of considered
his first.
One of his first movie in a way. And in some sense that's true because it is, sort of so personal. It's Little Italy. This world that he knew, Scorsese was sort of on the outside of in a way, but definitely in his sort of tapestry of his childhood and everything. All these like low-level gangsters and, the way that, what was the Saints' Day that was like sort of humming around in the background there? Anyway, it was Saint Someone's Day, and there's this parade that's happening sort of throughout the movie that's like, just a part of the atmosphere of the film. But, you could feel a lot of those things kind of coming through with Scorsese's own personality and whatever in this.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of the repeated people throughout these films, too, some of the actors, clearly these guys were part of the real deal around Little Italy at the time. The guy that plays Giovanni in Mean Streets, like this guy is you could tell this guy was a serious hitter.
Wait, was he he was Charlie's uncle, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
he was the actual sort of, I don't know, underboss of the little.
He's the guy that Charlie would not vouch for Johnny Boy with. Like like, I don't think I'm going to talk to my uncle just yet. I don't know if you're going to blow up another mailbox.
Right.
But yeah, I thought that this was a cool look at kind of a smaller hierarchy within like a smaller unit of this, and that's why I think I could latch on to it a lot. It felt like almost attainable. I'm not going to try to be a gangster tomorrow or anything like that, but I mean, it felt like that's the range that, how you start and how you get yourself like moved into that system.
Well, and that's another thing that like I bring that up, like, these movies sort of, grow step by step into getting, further and further up the gangster ladder as we go through this little series. Mm-hmm. In Mean Streets, it's a really, really small time. I mean, Charlie's uncle plays, like a, presumably, some sort of underboss or some sort of local chieftain of the mafia there. Mm-hmm. Still kind of probably small time, but, maybe he's made or, whatever. He's got the respect of everybody. But then, you see his buddy Michael, who I can borrow money from all over town, and when I can't borrow from nobody else, I'll come from you, right? Michael, the guy who's chasing Johnny Boy the whole time for some debts, is way lower. He's a loan shark, but he's kind of a gangster.
He's the guy that he's trying to sell lens adapters at the beginning, thinking they're lenses, right? Yeah.
German lenses.
You got the adapters, dude.
Yeah.
That was funny.
And and that's the other thing. It's like, for a sort of serious and just hard hitting and unflinching as a lot of these movies are, they're also very funny. Like
Hilarious.
At
Yeah.
And like he does such a good job of getting the audience to want to sort of buy into and feel a part of this very foreign thing to most people who are not in organized crime, and feel like, oh, I could see the appeal of it.
Yeah. Especially Goodfellas. Goodfellas makes it fun.
It's people are just hanging out and having fun. These are my buddies, and we just do whatever we want, and blah blah blah.
Oh, we could play cards all night. No one will tell us to leave. Sounds good.
Hey, Tommy, why don't you go fuck yourself?
That's fucking right. I don't believe what I just heard.
Good boy, Spider. Good boy.
That's for you, Spider.
That's for you, Spider. I wanted to bring up some of the, I guess it's absurdity, or not, it's more comedy, but it kind of came out of nowhere. That Tony, the owner of this bar that's kind of the central location of Mean Streets, he had a pet lion. It was almost some strange flex that he had this like pet lion in his back that he would just show off to people, but it was kind of introduced and then forgotten about. I was hoping that it would rip someone's face off at some point.
They couldn't afford to have the lion around for too many scenes, so
It must have cost a ton to have that for the one day.
have a tranquilized lion, yeah. And it's funny because like you kind of just get the sense that, I don't know what, he bought it as an investment and was going to try to sell it or something.
These things are worth a lot. I do want to bring up, you brought up how personal Mean Streets feels to Scorsese, and I'd say that definitely relates to the sanctuary that they found going to the movies. That was kind of their escape, it's like
right.
trying to stay off the streets, stay out of trouble for a little bit. Let's go to the movies, let's chill out, let's do that thing. And I love those shots of the movie. You never see the movie. I think you did see the movie, but when you see those straight on shots of the people just watching above the camera, I think that that's really strong. And I obviously that was like his love of the cinema just interjecting into this film.
Right, exactly. I mean, and that was, I'm sure, part of his life growing up. I mean, he would be addicted to going to the movies, and like there would be all these like revival houses and whatever around him. It's like they'd be playing the thing for pennies or whatever, and movies he could afford, and then that became his sort of like film school in a way. And
probably play like 3 or 4 movies in a row and just sit there all day. Yeah.
And so that's like that was the part of the world that like he would have this like crazy shit going on in the background. People being assassinated at the bar down the street, and hearing these stories about these things. But for him, like his world was spent in different movie houses and whatever.
I'm glad he did, because he made these movies as well as like 60 other ones, so or at least 60 other projects. So it's like I'm really glad that he took the time to learn film, because this guy is obviously one of the greats. I mean, all of these movies were so fun. Not fun. They were just really good to watch, and it's great that we're actually pulling some really good movies out on this podcast. It's making it much easier to watch 3 movies in a row.
Yeah. I think, maybe part of this was like, when we were talking about how it was great watching like 3 classics with Citizen Kane and Rashomon and all this.
Yeah.
That, maybe we should kind of like, give ourselves a breather on sometimes like, these deep dives.
We started a trend, man.
Watch all like classics or whatever.
Watch good movies. Feel better about yourself.
I mean, and the thing is like, so as sort of personal as Mean Streets was, like, it's like he got hired onto Boxcar Bertha by Roger Corman to do that sort of exploitation movie. Was prepping another one, the name of which I'm forgetting at the moment, but apparently, John Cassavetes talked to him, and who was an idol of his. He watched a lot of John Cassavetes like independent movies, and they were like, John Cassavetes, was an actor, but then would also save up a little money, put together a little independent project, and he would do these movies that were like the French New Wave, but in New York. And for Scorsese, it was like something he could relate to a lot more than perhaps the Streets of Paris or whatever in Breathless or some of these movies. But essentially, Cassavetes talked him into doing something a little more personal, and he's like, you could do a million of these Corman movies and sort of not get to anything that is going to speak to yourself,
right?
And just be a work-a-day. He
would just be another director. Just another director working the Corman system, as opposed to Martin Scorsese,
right?
Director of Taxi
exactly.
Driver and Mean Streets. Yeah.
Scorsese then was able to parlay that into Mean Streets, and from there he goes on to do, probably one of his most iconic movies, Taxi Driver, and in between there, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore and New York, New York, both of which are really good. Probably not the classic status as Taxi Driver, but both really interesting. But throughout that period, he was really getting heavily into drugs and cocaine in particular.
He OD'd.
And yeah, exactly. He was like doing sort of famously doing a press junket for New York, New York, and like where he sits in a room and like it's like a reporter comes by, asks him a few questions, the next reporter comes by, next reporter comes by, next reporter comes by for different outlets, and having to answer the same questions over and over again. And at one point he's like, you know what? I'm out of cocaine. The press junket's over, and like walks away. And then it just like sort of went into kind of a spiral because like the both the financial and the critical failure of New York, New York kind of made him doubt whether or not movie making was for him. And he then ended up ODing, like you're saying. He goes to the hospital, and like De Niro came by to try to get him to come on board to do Raging Bull, and he didn't want to. And
I think he presented the book to him at the time. It was
LaMotta's
book.
What the fuck am I going to do with this?
I don't even like sports. I think his response.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a movie guy. Yeah.
right. And then what is great about that is that he was finally convinced to do it. And when he does, it's sort of one of his greatest achievements. It's just like sort of creatively, and that again, that sort of that neighborhood and the personal thing and all these other pieces of it. The movie is just so successful, and it's where like a lot of his like theater troupe of like people that are in his orbit either come back into his orbit or like come into it for the first time. Joe Pesci, Frank Vincent.
Pesci's first time? Was that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mardick Martin, what was the guy who wrote the first draft, who wrote Mean Streets. And then Paul Schrader wrote the second draft, who wrote Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
And then this is his first collaboration with Thelma Schoonmaker, who has gone on to be
the editor.
His partner in crime through all these movies as his editor.
The Moviola editor. I think that was the old school. Is that right, Thelma? Yeah. And then Michael Chapman shot it, which is probably one of the most outrageously shot movies. It's two different movies put into one, I think.
Yeah.
The boxing movie is a completely different movie in the best way.
Yeah,
Totally. It's like,
all that stuff, it has this sort of personal drama at the core of it. These really expressionistic and just mind-blowing sequences in the ring. And then, it's a whole other movie when he's the old, fat, falling apart.
Stand up?
Yeah, exactly.
Somewhat stand up? I mean, if you own your own club, you can put yourself up every night, right? Like, I guess that's kind of what he got.
Or like the time where he's emceeing for the like sort of strip club, like day drinking bar. And no one wants to hear his stupid jokes. It's just, oh man,
they were pretty bad. I mean, the delivery was bad, but
and how great is like Robert De Niro playing somebody who's not acting very well? He's like so good at it.
He is just amazing. That he goes from, he's in the ring. You could tell he really trained hard to be a boxer. He's in these conversations where he is clearly the most insecure person on the planet and can play that down to a T. And then Man. So, as usual, Chrissy participated in a couple of movies. Two, actually, this time. GoodFellas she hadn't seen yet, and watched Raging Bull. Yeah. And, again, halfway through, she was just like, this dude is the worst. I'm like, yeah, he's pretty bad dude.
Well, and that unflinching part of it is the thing that Scorsese does so well. It's like, it's so hard to feel for this guy, particularly because you spend whatever it is, like 2 hours with him just being the worst person on earth.
Yes.
And then you see him in that jail cell, and you start to like get this like empathy for him in a way because he's just so broken, you know. And that performance just is like it's mind blowing. I'm not an animal. That sequence, you know.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to cold open with him as the older LaMotta, in full makeup and full bravado, I guess. I thought it was interesting because that is, not who you get throughout most of the movie. You get that young, athletic, hothead, really, Jake LaMotta, or Jack.
Well, the first time I saw it, I didn't quite realize that was De Niro at the very beginning.
A horse. My kingdom for a horse. I haven't had a winner in 6 months.
Yeah, I know.
It's just
the makeup's good.
Yeah, and he looks so different, and then you it's like it bell dings and it cuts to him as a young man, and like you're like, okay, there he is, and like
Yeah,
and then when it cuts back to him in the 60s or whatever, that poolside thing, and he's just this bloated fat mafia boss type of guy. It's just like it's like, is that the same actor? You know what I mean? It's like, it's crazy.
So let's go to that real quick. This is part of the Scorsese's Gangsters Part 1 3-picture deal that we've got going on here with the studio. Raging Bull, the connection there was that Jake was going to be sponsored, or in a way sponsored by the local mafia, right? Taking a dive, or at least it was kind of like the Butch story in Pulp Fiction, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
but
pride,
I mean,
fucking with you.
Fuck
Exactly. Pride.
Well, fuck pride. So I mean, I guess that this is the connection to it all. One of those gangsters being Billy from Goodfellas, who gets his ass beat in both of these movies
By Joe Pesci.
By Joe Pesci. Scorsese set those two up pretty well.
Well, they were good friends before this. Pesci and Frank Vincent, and apparently they were both musicians and sort of touring around and doing just oddball vaudeville act type things.
Really?
And and in a band and all this stuff. And then they had done some indie movie together that no one had seen, and De Niro saw it and was like, "Hey, you should cast these guys, Marty, when you're looking for the Joey LaMotta character."
Yeah.
And that's basically how Joe Pesci got looped into the fold of the Scorsese family.
He's so good. Pesci is so good in Raging Bull, man.
It's nuts. I mean, it's technically not his first film, but it's like his first film definitely of this scale, and it's just it's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. He completely owns it. And it's his character, Joe, is trying to manage his brother, trying to manage him,
right?
Which is, a fool's errand in many respects. It's this guy is a complete, I don't know, a bomb ready to go off at any given time, and at any time asking his brother
as a raging bull.
Yeah, exactly. This bull will rage.
I'm the boss. 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 I'm the boss.
I loved, for someone that's not into sports, how they filmed the boxing. I know I brought this up, but to think that at the same time, you're talking about 1 or 2 years after Rocky, a full color, full wide screen presentation of a boxing match that is completely different than this. And he really separated this from another boxing movie from that time. This was not a boxing movie,
Well, because of the boxing, and because Irwin Winkler, the producer of this movie, produced the Academy Award-winning box office smash Rocky, that helped get this black and white, low-level gangster, wife-beating, sort of monster portrait greenlit in a way that wouldn't have been done before. I mean, it's like
also underage wife, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's easy to imagine that it came out in 1980. In between Mean Streets and Raging Bull, De Niro and Scorsese did Taxi Driver, and also sort of in between the Mean Streets and Raging Bull years, De Niro won an Oscar for Godfather 2, and definitely very bankable, let's say, just star and directing duo.
Sure.
However, the movie they did right before this, New York, New York, was not a financial success. So like, it wasn't like this movie was just an easy slam dunk green light.
Right.
Particularly because, he wants to make it in black and white, wants to have it have all these very risky creative moves in it, like having the fight scenes.
Like Hitchcock. It was like Hitchcock type setups.
Yeah, I mean, like the crazy artifice that Hitchcock was sort of known for could be seen in some of those boxing scenes.
Also, the Saul Bass, very rigid, compositions. That opening shot of him shadow boxing with the title in there, that was very.
Right. Yeah.
Very like almost caged. Very interesting. Right. Yeah.
Well, and what's fascinating about the in the ring thing too is like, if you contrast this with Rocky, for instance, like Rocky's this underdog, and he's got all these redeeming qualities or whatever, but he's not like beating the shit out of Adrian, and
no, he loves Adrian. He'd do anything for Adrian. He buys her pets.
Right.
Yeah.
And eventually drink serving robots or whatever.
And I'm gonna get Paulie a snow cone machine.
But it's like
LaMotta doesn't have much redeeming about him other than his talent in the ring. I did want to bring up Kathy Moriarty, Vicky.
Yeah.
Very much in the same caliber, I'd say, as Jodie Foster in Taxi Driver, the young person that's kind of taking charge, and her relationship with the gangsters at the time around the pool, and like that right. Big, and she was just this. She seemed like this like golden idol that Jake LaMotta was after, and once he had her, right. she was no longer important, and his paranoia sets in, and unfortunately this one goes down the tubes again. But some of the greatest performances between him and her were just amazing stuff.
Yeah,
I fucked them all. I fucked your brother. I fucked everybody.
Go away. Yeah, exactly. And he has this like ability to take people who are either non-actors or first-time actors and kind of get the best out of them.
Is that his improv work? Is that him sitting there and really like working it out with them?
I mean, I feel like that's part of it. Allowing the actors to feel comfortable. There's a lot of other directing styles where you're very rigid about what people say all the time, or like commanding that they stand here, look there, put your eyes there. It's like that, almost that Hitchcock approach.
Mm-hmm.
But his thing with actors is like he's supposedly very open to lots and lots of ideas all the time, and obviously all directors are like that in a way, but apparently that is something that makes it comfortable for the actors in a way where he's going to be able to get these really easy, free-flowing, natural performances out of them that sometimes aren't replicated in the same way. I mean, look at Sharon Stone in Casino, right? I mean, she's mind-blowing. And she's a fine actress or whatever. It's whatever, but like it's like that level of like just head popping, like immersion, and just like you can't even believe what you're seeing type of thing. I don't know if she's been able to replicate something like that in her career. You know what I mean? And same with maybe Kathy Moriarty. I mean, part of it is in a lot of these movies, Joe Pesci's playing Joe Pesci.
Sure.
Or like the Joey character and the Tommy character and the Nicky character in Casino. At least in the times where he's breaking out and fighting everyone, those bursts of violence, like he's playing the sort of Joe Pesci thing. Mm-hmm. It's not to say that like he's not giving a performance and he's not a great actor, and he is, but like his range wasn't tested, I don't think, until we get to The Irishman, where he plays a totally different role, and it's kind of a wild thing to see him transform
late in his career.
Yeah. But yeah, he finds a way to like get these people, and that includes like even like casting his parents or whatever. He has
his mom pops in twice. Yeah, Raging Bull and Goodfellas, right?
Right. I'm trying to think of a better example. Like, okay, here's a great example. In Goodfellas, the guy who plays Tootie, like Paul Sorvino's brother or whatever, who's also Mr. Big in Wayne's World.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, why does this guy look familiar? I was like, he should have a ponytail.
Cassandra, you're amazing. Crucial thought. You're going to get signed.
Yeah, no, he's like, I want to sign you. I drove all the way back here just to tell you you're not good enough. Like, you didn't think we were going to end the movie that way, did you?
Yeah, right.
But like that guy, he was like a manager for music talent. He was Michael Jackson's manager for a while.
No way.
He wasn't like an actor primarily, right?
Wow.
But his role in GoodFellas, playing Tootie, like it just you totally buy him. It's not like you watch The Wire and it's like when they would cast sort of locals or people who were actual gangsters or whatever, and it was like they were non-actors playing these roles, and it kind of stood out. In one sense, it lent a sort of authenticity to it, and in a lot of senses, it kind of took you out of it because what they were saying wasn't being delivered convincingly. For whatever reason, with unknowns or people who are sort of non-actors, like he somehow is able to like elicit these really convincing and natural performances out of them.
Yeah.
And very memorable in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, quotable.
Quotable, exactly. Like,
and I'm sure that was like one line that someone pulled out of an improv in a scene that they cut into the movie, but it's going to be repeated for history,
right,
forever.
Exactly. We're gonna toughen this kid up. Like, it's like
you broke your cherry.
Yeah.
Like,
actually, okay, the Tootie character, it's perfect because like in Wayne's World, he's less convincing, even though he's playing a character in Wayne's World that's much closer to what his life is like outside of his acting career, which is like in this music business. Him playing the like brother of the gangster, which I don't know anybody about the actor. Maybe he is a gangster. I don't know, but presumably he's not that same person that he's playing in GoodFellas. But
Henry,
totally
you're a real jerk. I wasted like 4 aprons on that guy. You're a real jerk.
Yeah, you're a real.
Gotta toughen this kid up. Let's get into GoodFellas. And in many ways, I mean, I guess the comparison here is that the Copacabana is in both of these, right? We get a version of that in Raging Bull, and then obviously that amazing oneer that we get in GoodFellas. Yeah. But I wanted to talk real quick, technically from the beginning of GoodFellas. And we brought up Hitchcock just recently, but the Saul Bass credits at the beginning of this, and actually I think it's technically edited also by Saul Bass, or there's something in the credits of that. It's like designed by Saul Bass or something. It's like Scorsese put him as it an editor? I don't remember exactly.
Well, it was him doing the opening title sequence. You mean, right? With the like
exactly. Yes, and I love how simple it is. It's just the word or the names coming in, but with the sound of the traffic going, and then we're right in the back of the car.
Right. What was that? We hit a bump or something? What was that?
It's the hoof.
The paw. The paw.
The hoof. So yeah, this again, like this is, in my opinion, his very, very, very best film. It's my favorite of his films by far. Right off the bat, like we say from the credits, it's got a really cool style to it. You've got that red light that's beaming on the gangsters as they're chopping this guy up in the back of the at the back of the trunk with that the brake light on and everything. It like hits you over the head that this is just going to be. I mean, it's an inciting incident for sure to say at the beginning. Some dude just getting his chest getting stabbed and then plowed like 3 times by a gun right in the back, and then the next line is, "All my life I always wanted to be a gangster." It's like, boom. And it's this one, like Raging Bull, is it's an origin story in many ways, and we follow Henry Hill, who was I guess a low level to then a high level gangster in New York during the 60s through the 80s. I think that sounds right.
Yeah.
About 20 years through that time, his rise and drastic fall, and I guess everybody around him as well.
Right, exactly. I mean, and the thing is, like, it like sort of Casino and Mean Streets, we're following a character who sort of is around and accessory to some of the murders, but is not the like murdering psychopath or the person who's doing the worst atrocities. Right. That's the Tommy character and the Jimmy the Gent character. Sort of doing the the craziest stuff. But he has this sort of magic trick of getting you to go along with and be a party to all the things that Henry's a part of, because by contrast, Henry's, less of a bad guy, less of a gangster than say Tommy, who's
Not
just,
to say that he's a good person, but yes, he is not the murderous type. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, grading on the curve, he's the good guy here,
Yeah. Many levels of bad.
Yeah. But, I like what's also fascinating is, probably GoodFellas is going to be the one he's remembered for the most. It's, a lot of the things that, because part of the thing I was building up toward with that whole explanation of how he got to Raging Bull was that, because New York was such a both critical and commercial failure, he himself was feeling like a failure, and then was sort of convinced by De Niro and Winkler, the producer, to do this, and he came back and rocked the Casbah and became this this really creative expression, and was sort of robbed at the Oscars for it or whatever, and as best director and best film or whatever. Lost best director to
and
an
for
actor.
30 years after that,
And then gets the GoodFellas. This other somehow tops that as a high watermark creatively and everything else, and also loses to an actor for best director. It's fantastic.
who did he lose to in 90?
Kevin Costner.
For Dances with Wolves?
Yeah.
Oh. So the actor-director got it that year.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to have to go on the record here in this pod and say that I would much rather watch GoodFellas than Dances with Wolves.
Yeah. I wonder why. Yeah, it's just the movie is just. It's amazing, and it's such a pointed contrast to the other types of gangster movies, the mafia movies, whatever, and even in this period of Scorsese's career, it's his movies still have this real grittiness to them. GoodFellas in particular, it's extremely grainy. Everything's sort of gray, and all the colors are muted, and
They're probably in $1,000 or $3,000 suits sitting around an old dumpster, like an old chop shop, with a grill that's basically made out of a drum, these old oil drums, and but they're all in suits, sitting around.
Right.
It's a really odd
Or
grittiness.
It's the cops are people who can't go to the cops or whatever, that scene.
Yeah, exactly. That's the
While he's eating a sausage in slow motion.
I love that Paulie didn't want to talk to anybody in groups, so everyone would come over and just kind of whisper in his ear, and then he'd just give him a nod or a no. I do want to bring Paul Sorvino, right?
Yeah.
Paulie's name. Fucking awesome in this movie. And he really was kind of the voice of reason for Henry, but Henry was not taken to it. He was too far gone, I think. But he was. I really sympathized with Paul Sorvino's character, Paulie. Even though, he was a bad dude, I get it. But, man, there were just some heartwarming scenes, like him cutting the garlic in prison. And,
right.
When Henry finally comes back, he's like, you got the wine? He's like, yeah, okay, now we can eat. All these fun lines that he had. It was
Right. And Scorsese's dad was the one cooking or whatever in the prison there.
You got to put 3 types of meat in there. You got to put the veal in there. Oh, and the pork. That's where the flavor's at. I love that. Well, let's talk about Scorsese's mom's appearance in this one specifically. These 3 guys show up at 3 a.m. And if you look at the clock, it's 3 a.m. This woman with a dead body or a dying body in their back trunk that they're about to cut up, and she makes them the biggest dinner that you see during one of their afternoon meals.
Right.
That's the best line or best scene. And then when they show her artwork of the 2 guys. The 2 dogs looking
one way.
I got one dog looking one way. One's looking north, one's looking south. What of it?
And this guy over here, he's like, what do you want from me?
He kind of looks like somebody I know. Without the beard. Oh, God.
No, exactly. And that's another example of okay, it's not like Catherine Scorsese was an actress, right? It's but these guys, Joe Pesci and De Niro, were, Scorsese's friends, Martin Scorsese's friends. So it's like, her cooking for them was not something out of the ordinary. And he got her into this really comfortable place where she was able to just like, riff with them. And, it's totally believable, right? It's like... and
when she tells the joke, oh, you're always talking.
Yeah.
The way she like delivers the punchline of the
It
joke.
sounds much better in Italian.
But in Italian, it sounds much nicer, you know. Yeah, that's it.
I also wanted to bring up Karen, or the role of Karen, in I guess in relationship to like Kathy Moriarty's character, but Lorraine Bracco's character of Karen. Again, it was kind of in that realm of you were talking about Sharon Stone, but this is like an explosive, big change from her blow up as Liz Taylor in the middle of the street. You got a lot of nerve standing me up, Henry Hill, all that stuff. To then, when they're both kind of coked out at the end and just super paranoid. Right. But then there's also her sitting on the bed, that gun POV of her holding the gun to Henry's head. And man, that was like kind of the breaking point in that movie because she knew that he was screwing around on her and she wasn't having it. I thought she was a great, strong character. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and that scene, the scene where he gets sort of bailed out of prison after the moment by moment day, the sort of rock and roll coke fueled helicopter day. Yeah, he gets out of prison there, and like he's like, "Where is it? Where is it?" She's like, "I flushed it down the toilet." Right,
$60,000.
That scene, both of those were just so tour de force.
Oof,
and like just like so moving, and then he did this thing where it was like most of it was just sort of played in this like wider shot where you feel like a lot of times you'd want to get in a lot closer, but in this one you sort of just get to feel what everyone's going through there, but he creates the perfect balance of that where it's not like, he's being a little too remote and sort of just allowing the audience to sort of look or
he's more than a fly on the wall.
Observe, yeah, exactly. Fly on the wall, like observe wherever they want. But he would pick these moments to emphasize those things, and both of those scenes kind of had that as a way out of the scenes, which are just like brilliant moves.
This movie's probably, like you said, the most memorable. Like we said, the bamboo lounge sequence, the bamboo lounge when they blow the place up. So basically you see how gangsters will take control of a restaurant. Like, Paul, I don't know what the hell to do with a restaurant. I don't know the restaurant business. So what do? They just sell things out the back door until the place goes under, and then they burn it down for the insurance money.
Right, exactly.
Pretty classic way to run a restaurant. But then there's the sweet lounge where Billy is killed by Pesci. And the one thing that he says after he's so remorseless that he just says, "I didn't want to get blood on your floor. I'm sorry about that."
Right.
It was, man, you really get to know who Tommy
chills.
is at that point. And then we get into Spider, the Spider scene, when he's making the Oklahoma Kid dance.
Yeah.
That part bothered me, always bothered me. But man, there's just a lot of great stuff.
Well, that's on purpose. It's like,
Oh yeah.
Okay, you don't feel too bad for Billy Batts. He's a piece of shit. He's an asshole. But Spider didn't deserve to get 4 slugs in the chest for that. And
because in a way, he was Henry, younger Henry, right? Henry was in that same position, and you had already seen Henry in that, kind of gopher, role as a kid. You're going to run and do this, run and do this, run and do that. And he was doing that same thing. And he actually did what he was supposed to do, right? Like he stood up to what, someone talking shit to him, he stood up to him, but Tommy wasn't having that, and he's like, "Wait, I thought you guys were all busting my balls." We're like, we're all joking. He goes, "Well, I don't know. You seem serious." Just kill somebody, He's like, you got to dig the hole now. He goes, "Oh, this is the first hole I've dug. I'll dig another hole."
Well, and just the way that the Jake LaMotta character was really, really fragile. The Tommy character was also very fragile, and because of that, had to like make up for it by murdering people or whatever, and fucking them up.
Yeah.
Yes. Speaking of the Billy Bat scene, real quick though, like there's that shot that I always sort of remember of like the camera looking up at De Niro while he's
stepping
like
on his
stomping
face
down, and it really staccato.
That was in Mean Streets,
stomping, which is also in Mean Streets. And also in Raging Bull when he's beating up his brother
on Pesci,
at
right?
home. Yeah, and like it's that same shot, and De Niro has that same expression on his face of like sort of concentration. Yeah,
just looking right down on him, like obviously just slamming his foot on their face. It's so good.
Yeah, it's like he's like he's got that like putter on the green concentration face on, but to, like, stomp someone's face. But yeah, like and also like the bamboo lounge or whatever it was called. That scene was like a perfect explanation of like sort of how this gangster thing works. Of like, okay, Paulie comes on board to be a partner in this business venture, which means that this guy can like go to Paulie if he has any trouble or whatever, and Paulie will step in and be his godfather and sort everything out. But the price of that is that everything that like comes in the door, he takes a percentage off the top, and then everything like all the supplies that come in one door go out the other door and get sold.
It's so good how they describe it in the movie too. In the front door and out the back.
Yeah, exactly. It's like perfect illustration.
Yeah.
But that also like is like a perfect way to sort of understand this legalized form of what was being expressed in this movie, which is called like a leveraged buyout. Right, it's the type of things that like Bain Capital does. It's like it's what happened to Toys R Us. Like the reason there's no more Toys R Us is because they got in with these hedge funds that like then would take a percentage off the top. Like sell out all this like crap in the business that like sort of made it functional. They hollowed it out and then like it collapsed. Like, oh, see you later. It's like it is the sort of like legalized gangster shit that it's like easy to condemn in GoodFellas, but somehow is like totally legal. Acceptable outside of GoodFellas. It's like it's crazy.
Maybe when we remake this movie, we'll do it for from Toys R Us. The bamboo lounge will be replaced with Toys R Us. That's the only change. I like that. I wanted to bring up Maury from Maury's Wigs
today.
And again, we had that kind of change of format with video when we see his commercial, his old school commercial of him jumping in the pool, with the hairnet falling off. I wanted to bring that scene up specifically because right after that scene, he's getting strangled by De Niro and his hair comes right off. Right, and you hear.
It'll withstand wind and swimming pools, but not getting choked with a phone cord.
But the way Liotta laughs. And like you can clearly see that was like a real laugh, like that was like a real moment where he was just thought that was hilarious. De Niro had that putter's face. Right.
It's concentration. You know what's funny is like I saw this movie second. I saw Casino first, and then I saw GoodFellas second.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is wild because like De Niro is the focal point of Casino. But in this one, it's obviously the Ray Liotta character, and De Niro is like I'd say almost like a tertiary character, or maybe even further down the line. It's like Ray Liotta, Lorraine Bracco,
yeah, right,
Joe Pesci, then maybe De Niro.
Yeah,
and it's funny because like in this, there's the Jimmy the Gent character certainly has a big impact and is around all the time, but he's again not the focal point. But even given that, he has like such an amazing performance throughout it, even though he's not like basically the star of the movie. And like the scene in particular where it's like the cream or like the sunshine of your love, like when right after the Lufthansa heist, it sort of like does this like slow pushing on him.
That's when the paranoia sets in.
Yeah, like he's had enough with these guys around him.
Everybody gets taken out.
Why don't we just kill everybody and then I'll get to keep all the money? And but you see that like that really almost gleeful expression in his face when he like makes the decision to sort of kill everybody else in the Lufthansa heist. And it's such like it's just a tiny little moment, but it's like one of those things where it's like you needed an actor of the caliber of De Niro to be able to pull it off.
But what's great about that is that tragic and very horrific scene set to that music comes right after a really funny scene where everyone made all these big purchases with the Lufthansa money, like the new Cadillac and the new mink coat and everything. He keeps just everybody that would walk in, he would just take their coats off and like send them back. He's like, "Get the fuck out of here! You know, you're gonna bring this back. Bring the." He's like, "Are you listening?"
What was the guy's name with the crazy like little fro Carbone or whatever his name was?
He's the one that wanted to take the coffee to go before they killed, or right after they killed Stax. He's like, "You want the coffee to go?" He's like, "No, leave the coffee." He goes, "Oh, I was making coffee." When Maury gets ice picked, Carbone's in the car too. I think he's the driver at the time. And he's like, "Oh, you want me to go now?" He's like, "Yeah, go now." He's like, "Oh, well, no." Oh, man.
Yeah, no, he seemed like a
he was in
he
The
almost
Wedding
seemed
Singer.
like oh, really? Yeah.
He's in The Wedding Singer. He's like his brother-in-law in The Wedding Singer.
He almost seems like a Harry Shearer character, where it's like, you know, it's like Harry Shearer would play the parody version of him, or it's like, you know, is that Handsome Dan? You know, it's like he's like,
Hi.
He almost has that like Harry Shearer like voice a little bit, and like the comic relief.
What are you waiting for?
I'm waiting. The car's cold.
Get the fuck out of here! What? Fucking warm it up. Get out of here!
But you could also see maybe Harry Shearer like playing that role like very straight like that.
But again, it was like he's a funny character in Goodfellas as well. And like you said, he is kind of the comic relief. But then you see him dead. I think he's the one that's hung in the meat locker.
Yeah,
and he's got like icicles hanging from his nose. Horrific kind of stuff. I think the effects were KNB, which, you know, became
really?
huge.
Oh, wow.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. But the effects and blood shed in this movie were not just, you know, over the top. They weren't over the top at all. I thought they were very stylized. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to bring up Stax's killing Samuel L. Jackson, who makes an appearance, who ended up falling asleep at his girlfriend's house with the truck, and the cops had taken the truck while he was sleeping, and no one and that's kind of how they wanted to cut off the connection to the heist here, so they took out Stax. And man, when he gets his head blown off, and like the entire bed and bedroom are just splattered with blood, like where the hell did that hose come? You know what I mean? Like where the hell do they have that thing set up?
And I don't know if you noticed, but like that's like a miniature oneer for that, where it's like,
yeah,
you see him get out of bed, follow him to the door, follow him back to put his shoes on, and then his head gets blown off.
Awesome.
And it's also one of those things where it's like the violence in this movie, and I guess in Raging Bull as well, were such that unlike maybe, you know, Evil Dead or, you know, other K&B films, you know, From Dusk Till Dawn or something, where it's like you're sort of enjoying, or the sort of cartooniness of the violence or whatever. This one, it's not like that. You have to take the violence seriously. You know, it's extreme and it's like disgusting, but it's also very grounded and real and not cartoonish.
And no, not at all. And very like camera magical. I want to bring up the guy Bruce, the dickhead that lives across the street from Karen.
Yeah,
the guy.
yeah.
So
also a little oneer too.
That's
yeah.
right after the Maury shot. Exactly, that's another oneer. But that's right after he leaves Maury's place. Right, he's like, I got to get out of here. It's Karen. Right. He goes over there, and when he starts pistol whipping this guy, at one point he touches his face to release the blood packet. But it's so well done and in camera that once he touches his face, the blood's already there, and it just kind of worked really well. First time seeing that, you're like, holy shit! Did he...
too of like that like metal on bone. It's just,
Oh man! And then the way that Liotta walks back, and he's got that fucking look on his face, man. Oh my god! He's like, hide this.
Right? He just looks like a hyena. It's just like, yeah. But I got to admit, it kind of turned me on. Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it's just, it's so intense, and because it's being held in that oneer, and it's kind of like sort of a wide shot. It's like, you know, it has that punctuation feeling of like, you know, really feeling the how do you say it? It's like the sort of reality of that situation is, you know, hammered home for you. You know, it's like there's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to cut away. It's like it's almost that feeling you got in Long Good Friday when he's like
at the very end,
that guy in the neck, and like,
oh god,
and you just sit there and look at it, and you see like the life kind of drain out of his eyes in Long Good Friday, and it's like, you know, you could see a version of that where you're like cheering for him because he finally got the like son of a bitch who, you know, created this whole problem. But the way it's done, it's like horrifying in a way that it's it's like so shocking and like so unrelenting.
There's like no glory in it.
There's no glory. It's like it's so painful and so disgusting. And that's the way it felt watching Ray Liotta beat that guy's ass, even though that guy's a piece of shit, and you felt like you wanted to have that coming. But but having it covered a different way, maybe it would feel more heroic or something. But like that way was like so naked and ugly and raw. You're like, oh, I don't like this feeling. It's not good.
Yeah, but you wanted to see his ass get beat down the second they met him on vacation or whatever the hell they were at the Hamptons or whatever they were.
For sure. I mean, again, sort of just like in Long Good Friday, where the guy is a scumbag and you don't like that character. And you want to see something terrible befall him, and then when it happens, you're like, I don't like this. Maybe I made the wrong choice. It's like, as the audience, like your emotions of reveling in that violence, your expectations the tables get turned on you, where you're now a party to this, and it doesn't feel so good.
Right.
It's like it's not the righteous revenge of maybe killing Billy Bats and the like get your shine box and all this, right? Like you didn't feel too bad for that guy going down. And especially like the way it was cut with the music, and the different coverage, and like De Niro's putter's face, and all these things, but in that sort of really raw, unblinking look that Henry smashing that gun in that guy's nose. I mean, you just it felt gross inside. You couldn't revel in the violence the way you can in certain other moments.
Well said.
Yeah.
Seriously, that was great.
Long said. Okay.
No, that was great.
I just want to say a couple other things. I just like I'm excited to maybe we'll get into a little more of the through line throughout his career in the second half of this. But there is like a great dividing point here, and I think not only are these three movies like in that sort of like gritty feel, climbing up the rung slowly of both Scorsese's career, but also in the sort of hierarchy of these gangsters. But there is this very gritty style that it's not just okay. That's what film and everything looked like at that time. Contrast Raging Bull or Goodfellas with New York, New York, and like New York, New York is really polished and looks like a movie from the 50s, like if you took a Technicolor movie from the 50s, and it kind of has that really kind of glossy old Hollywood style to it. And it's not like he wasn't capable of doing those things, but like all these things were choices. The grittiness of Taxi Driver and
served the narrative, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And Goodfellas is that way. But what we'll see next time is how Casino becomes very, very polished. It doesn't have the same grit anymore. It has this sort of fantasy, photography, like the Robbie Richardson, who, shot a lot of Oliver Stone stuff, including JFK. With
that bright, one light that's in there that just kind of...
The light that's sort of like, blown out two stops on someone's shoulder.
Right.
And then it has that filter on it to make it bloom.
Bloom, yeah.
And, it has this fantasy sort of unearthly quality to it.
And Joe Bob Briggs is in it.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting comedian cameos, playing these straight roles, like Don Rickles.
Don Rickles is awesome in this.
What's his name? Alan King is in it too. And
don't we also get the usual suspect, Kevin Pollak? Isn't he also?
Yeah, Kevin Pollak. Yeah,
Kevin
right.
Pollak
is in
it.
And he's really good at it too. Yeah, that's a good call.
Yeah,
but I think there was that sort of gritty period that he was Scorsese was in, and I think he basically leaves that after Goodfellas, right? I mean, it's like, Cape Fear is very glossy. The very next one he did.
The Departed felt a little on the dirtier side.
Did it?
It probably was much more polished than these, but...
Right. I mean, there's just something so ugly, but in a beautiful way, kind of grittiness to a lot of this stuff that I think his movies after that just become a lot more polished. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing.
Yeah.
But it's just, this different stylistic choice that he's making. And anyway, it'll be a fun contrast to these. As his sort of like movies get sort of more expensive and bigger and more polished, we're also getting higher and higher into the heights of the like levels of gangster that he gets into.
Very interesting.
And maybe to just quickly justify Raging Bull here, it's like, obviously there are gangsters in it, that they're not quite the focus, although the whole reason he can't get a shot at the title is because he won't play ball with the gangsters. And in doing all that stuff, like the gangsters like figure into his life the same way that they do in sort of Mean Streets. Even though Charlie's not exactly in the gangster world, he's not exactly out of it. De Niro, the Jake LaMotta and Joey LaMotta characters are not exactly in it, but they can't exactly operate without them.
Right.
And that's illustrated by how the sort of like what's funny, like the Frank Vincent character in Raging Bull, his name is Salvi, but you know what his last name is?
Tori?
No, Bats.
Oh,
Just
there
like
you go.
Billy
He's
Bats.
Billy Bats, Salvi Bats.
It's crazy.
It's like Vincent Vega and Vic Vega.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
But I did want to bring up, and it's something we didn't bring up, the gangster that they deal with mostly is played by Nicholas Colasanto, who was Coach on Cheers.
Oh,
And
yeah.
He was great.
He's really, really good. And
he's
his
fantastic.
right-hand man was Scorsese's dad, and like, but he was the guy. What was his name in the movie? Tommy.
Tommy Como.
And just like all of the other sort of like local bosses that we end up meeting in the rest of these movies of this block, they all have this like sort of magnetism to them, and like everyone around them has to
charismatic.
like,
yeah,
they're really charismatic, and it's. I mean, I guess if you're at the top of that heap, it's really easy to sort of be magnanimous and everything else because everyone has to kiss your ass. But the guy pulls it off really well. But anyway, it's like this is all sort of retroactive. But you picture Scorsese and like his gangster world, and you just think it's like, oh, it's this natural thing. Yeah, of course he does gangster shit, right? But like that thought kind of came into people's minds because of GoodFellas. I mean,
sure.
It's like, even Mean Streets isn't quite, fully immersed in that world the way that GoodFellas is.
No.
And certainly not Raging Bull, but like you also can't escape it in those two movies.
And also Mean Streets is his project, his written project, his story. GoodFellas is not, neither is Raging Bull, right? So, like that look at things, we got to see his perspective of what the limits of what he knew and what he was part of in Mean Streets.
Right.
And then he was like able to really dive deep.
Well, that's a good point too, because it's like all the rest of these movies. So we're watching these 5 movies for these 2 blocks, and 4 out of the 5 of them were sort of based on true stories and like depicting the real life of Jake LaMotta and Henry Hill and I can't remember the real person's name in Casino, but then Frank the Irishman Sheeran and the last one. But in Mean Streets, those aren't real characters per se, but they're sort of based on people he knew or things that he was aware of growing up there. And then what's also interesting is like all these movies, all 5 of them have this voiceover, except Raging Bull. But Raging Bull was sort of supposed to have it. The initial cut and sort of how it was scripted was that we would be cutting back to or hearing from the older LaMotta
In the
throughout
dressing
the
room
movie.
or green room.
And like they screened that version and everyone was like, the movie's not working. Holy shit. I don't think we did it. And then they went back in and just trimmed the fat LaMotta to just be bookends and have the skinny LaMotta be the sort of bulk of the movie uninterrupted. And all of a sudden it worked, and it is the movie we know and love today.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, so next week, part 2 of Scorsese's Gangsters. This was part 1. We'll be watching and talking about Casino and The Irishman. Casino I have seen a ton of times. The Irishman I have not yet seen. So again,
really?
A block of a movie that I haven't seen yet, but I'm very excited to see it because this is one that I don't know why I haven't, to be totally honest. I'm surprised I didn't jump on this right away, but it's just kind of came and I never saw it, and so now I'm really excited to watch it and talk about it.
Yeah, it's exciting. I had the good fortune of being able to see it in the theater twice,
Nice.
actually, which is also kind of rare because, like, not everyone even got the movie. in the theater, because it was kind of a straight to Netflix type of thing. And it was wild to see it in the theater. I'll talk about a little more about that next time. But I'm excited about it. Casino for me was my introduction to Scorsese, and it was this wild ride. And The Irishman, I'm excited about watching again. Even though I saw it twice in a row, basically when it came out. But it's been a little while now, and it'll be fun to revisit. And then in case you just didn't get enough of us gabbing about Scorsese and waxing his car about how great of a filmmaker he is, we'll do it all again next week.
I mean, there's enough that we can probably do this for like the rest of this pod.
Totally. I mean, he's got so many good ones.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to subscribe and follow us on all the podcasts and social platforms at the Grindhouse Institute. And if you really want to give us a boost, check us out on Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It'll help us to get noticed. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll be back next week.
Ciao.
I still love the life. And we were treated like movie stars with muscle. We had it all just for the asking. And now it's all over.